Burt Lancaster names the gay actors of old Hollywood he dated in secret. The birth of Lancaster was Burton Stephen Lawrence on November 2, 1913. In Lancaster from York City grew up in a working-class family and at first tried to become an acrobat in the circus and athlete, showing off their physical strength that would continue to shape many of his early roles in movies. Acrobatics wasn't just for young people endeavor but a fundamental part that contributed a lot to his screen being there allowed him to do his stunts with amazing speed and trust is something that not many people have. The actors of his time in Lancaster change from the circus ring to the silver screen began in the 1940s. Hollywood began to pay attention to his amazing looks, and a towering body and natural charisma helped him get ahead came with the 1946 movie The Killers, in which he played a doomed ex-boxer. This movie did more than just launch him into, not only made him a star, but also a responsible actor who can play. Lancaster's characters are intense and complicated. Being able to combine rugged masculinity with deep emotional nuance set him apart from many of his peers at the time, and he was able to handle a wide range of types of movies, from noir and westerns to epic tragedies and movies about social issues. Two things that make Lancaster's career stand out was he brave to go up against Hollywood's the norms and expectations. In the 1950s, he started his own business, Hecht Hill Lancaster Company, and Harold Heck and James Hill made this move history-making because it gave Lancaster more say over the kinds of projects he tried to get them to let him make movies that cared more about society and more artistically ambitious than usual studio fare with well-known movies. Marty 1955 was born during this time, which won the Best Picture Oscar and got praise for being honest scenes from everyday life, and Love Separate Tables 1958 that talked about complex feelings and social norms problems with Lancaster's work behind the scenes that showed his dedication not only to his craft but also to moving forward movies as a serious art form all the way through. During his career, Lancaster got a lot of praise and many awards, including 2 Academy Awards. His first win was in Came because of how well he played in trying to start over after being in prison in Elmer Gantry in 1960. His show was enticing, combining charm, danger, and moral ambiguity that showed off his great range as an actor, and later he won a second Oscar for his part in The Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962, where he drew a murderer who had been convicted who became a well-known prison reformer and a bird expert. These shows showed how good Lancaster was at showing deeply flawed complex people who have empathy and depth, taking the characters beyond just stereotypes. Burt has done more than just work on movies. Lancaster was also known for he was an activist with strong personal beliefs, a strong supporter of civil rights and justice for everyone, often using his famous person to support causes he believed in at a time when Hollywood was be careful about getting involved in politics. Lancaster stood out as an actor who was ready to speak out against racism and unfair treatment and injustice he fought for. Included help for artists' rights and unions, show a strong dedication to fairness and respect for human life. These traits earned people not only respect him in public, but also from his peers and the bigger picture. Neighborhood Lancaster had a big effect on film in many ways. Through the 1970s and 1980s, they kept taking on difficult and different roles that later performances stood out for, such as his role in The Swimmer 1968, a strange and emotionally intense film that has become a cult favorite, and Ocean City in 1980. Which earned him another nomination for an Academy Award and showed off his ability to play older people characters that are moving and complicated. Even though Hollywood changed, Lancaster changed and stayed important, always pushing the limits because of his art. Burt Lancaster got married. He was hit 3 times in his life and had 5 children with each of them. Chapter on family and relationships, showing different times in his life, growth and challenges in his life. A complicated private life often went hand in hand to his busy and well-known career in Hollywood, showing the real side of a star whose public image was defined by charisma and physical strength. Where his first he married June Ernst, a woman whose there were many connections between life and the world of circus and aerial arts. June Ernst wasn't like other wives. She was born into a family of trapeze artists, a family with a long history of circus arts. Her mother was a famous woman who does aerial work, an interesting person in the circus community during a time when women performers were trying out new edges. That Ernst had inherited this courage and skill, and before she had already married Lancaster set herself up as an accomplished. After Burt and June got married, he got very involved with her circus family, performing with them and getting better at acrobatics. This time was important for Lancaster, as his strength and athleticism became traits that made him stand out on screen later in life, though. Even though the background and acts of the wedding wasn't meant to last, the couple they split up in the late 1930s when getting divorced is a matter of some not being clear. While modern media reports said the year 1940 came later, biography writers going through records and accounts have suggested dates that extend as late as 1946. This difference has made it easier, for there was some confusion about the date of the relationships Lancaster had after that and getting married to his second wife. He was married to Norma Anderson, a relationship that came about because of things that happened during World War II. Smith, 1917 to 1988, was a stenographer at first who stepped to fill in for an actress who was sick in a USO production meant to be entertaining. There were American troops in Italy. At this point in time, Fate Normandy stopped her on her way to town from Burt Lancaster was seen at the airport and came out of the crowd and was hit by his good-looking and powerful presence. Reports say she became interested and went to an officer nearby and asked, "Who is that officer who looks good? Is he married?" The officer saw a chance and took it. Set up a blind date for the two of them that night. Their meeting marked the start of a long and important Lancaster's life. They got married. 1946. The start of what would become a complicated and involved in politics partnership that Norma was very involved in, putting money into political and social causes. Her drive to become an activist. Their bare home had a room just for them that was full of things like printing presses and paper for large mailings, are proof of Norma's duty to the League of Women Voters, an organization whose main goal is to teach and giving voters, especially women, the power to take part in democracy. Besides this, she had been a member of the NAACP, and both she and Burt they were committed to civil rights, and notably held a fundraiser to help King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the South before the Christian Leadership Conference, the important March on Washington in 1963, showing how committed they are to social justice at a key point in U.S. history. Burt and Norma had 5 children together. Bill Lancaster, who later started his own acting career, and James Lancaster is a screenwriter. Joanna Lawrence, who went on to make movies, and Sigel, pronounced Sheila Lancaster. Even though the outside look of a politically engaged and helpful family, there were a lot of problems in the marriage. Because of Lancaster's strict rules, career and personal problems at the same time strained their relationship. By 1966 the couple broke up, and their divorce was signed off on in 1969. During the ending of his second marriage, Burt Lancaster agreed to a long-term, having a rough time with Jackie Bona, someone who did hair on the set of one of the movies made by the big projects Lancaster worked on in the late 1960s and early 1970s. How they were together was marked by drama and intensity. One in particular infamous event involved breaking bones Lancaster with a wine bottle over his head while at a dinner party where important people in the industry, like Sidney Pollack, a director, and Peter Falk. This episode showed how passionate but often rough nature of their bond. In the end, their relationship came in the end after Jackie Bone had a religious change. Lancaster, a man of strong personal values and beliefs, reportedly felt unable to make peace where their different spiritual paths led to their breakup. The third and last book by Burt Lancaster. He got married later in life. Susan Martin in the fall of 1990. Things were very different in this marriage. More quiet and less from his earlier unions. It was looked at closely by the public until his death in 1994, giving Lancaster someone to talk to in his last years. Susan Martin was with his partner during a time when Lancaster was taking care of health challenges, and think back on a long and an impressive career in their later years. Burt Lancaster, once the height of male bravado in Hollywood, is said to have told close friends a shocking and deeply personal message. A part of his past, his secret love ties to some of the most famous and hidden male figures of his during a time when being gay was not taboo, but it would also end Lancaster's career. Gotten through a complicated web of love, privacy and a shared sense of vulnerability behind the gleaming front of the Cary Grant was a star in the golden age of Hollywood. One of the most beautiful and well-crafted actors from his time, and Lancaster found Grant's writing to be very appealing. Honed their charm, wit, and mysteriousness. Smile that they met at a work event. In the late 1940s, both of them already stars but going in a different in film circles, people who had lived a long time with actor Randolph Scott in what many people later called a romantic partnership kept up a careful maiden image of sophistication, and Lancaster talked about the heterosexual appeal. Their link was electric, but careful about a relationship that grew over secret weekends at a beach that's far away, places to live along the Pacific Coast Highway. Grant was very private, and he was afraid. Sense of exposure was clear even with they had someone as brave as Lancaster there. The affair was short, but it was very emotional, ending with Grant pulling back further into his stronghold of discretion, unwilling to take a chance on his carefully kept persona. Maybe the most shocking thing of all was the claim by Lancaster of a short strange trouble with J. Edgar Hoover, the notorious FBI director who huge influence in politics and culture in the middle of the 20th century. Hoover, who was often said to have been married but never was to have been together with for a long time Clyde Tolson, who helped him, wasn't an actor, but kept close ties to Hollywood through his control over the media representations of police. And Lancaster remembered meeting about morality Hoover through people they both knew at a Washington, D.C., for a high-class charity gala. D.C., though it's not usually romantic the way they were together, was charged with how power works in keeping secrets. Lancaster said that Hoover was a man who was hungry for closeness, but he was afraid of his own thought, even though the connection is very scary. Given Lancaster a unique look into the mind of one of the most mysterious men have done great things in American politics. Hudson was the perfect leading man. Tall, good-looking, and going viral, became one of Lancaster's more emotionally charged. Getting along. They met on the set of a movie in the early 1950s, and their relationship took place at the height of Hudson's. Hudson was under tight control of fame. Studio handlers were always afraid. Fear of being found out, a fear that was later sadly learned after his death from AIDS in 1985, which made everyone tell them the truth that he had been hiding. For many years, Lancaster remembered Hudson as a kind heart and a body like a gladiator, someone who wanted love but didn't feel it was always out of reach for them. Long road trips were part of the relationship. Away from the paparazzi and through the desert where they could breathe easily if only for a weekend. Lancaster respected Hudson, wanted to keep things quiet, and they bond fell apart not because of lack of love, but because permanence is impossible in a world that would not accept it. The name on Lancaster's that no one expected on the list were teen idol Ricky Nelson and straight-haired TV star from The Antics of AZ and Harriet Nelson, who was almost 20 years younger than Lancaster, is said to have had a short and rocky relationship with the older actor in the early 1960s. Lancaster was a well-known star while Nelson was not, being able to grow up from a child performer into an adult artist. Though it was short-lived, very important to Nelson, who found in Lancaster was both a teacher and a guardian. Lancaster, on the other hand, knew about the imbalance and ended it gently, where Ricky could be alone to find his own identity both in the workplace and in particular. He remembered Nelson with a lot of care, calling him the boy who sang like the wind and kissed with the hunger of someone who had never been letting them want. Finally, there was Marlon Brando, was one of the most complicated and a great name on Lancaster's list. Lancaster wasn't the same as Brando at all. Impulsive, strange, and shameless, rebellious about their relationship, according to Lancaster's memory, was like a volcano. They met at a time when politics were high. An event in Hollywood in the late 1950s, and the sparks between them were instant. Uncontrollable and real. Brando, who was known for his flexibility and defiance of norms, lured Lancaster with smart ideas, debates that raise interesting questions, and a sensuality that was too strong to resist. Their relationship was a mess because ego, artistic competition, and a shared desire to emotionally beat each other and physically. Lancaster said this about Brando: "The only man I ever met who could make me feel fully undone by just looking at." Their relationship went on and off for fading over a few years, only when the having to keep secrets and deal with the personality clashes got too bad to carry. All of these relationships were kept secret from people, saw a very different picture. A different picture of Burt Lancaster, and bigger than the one shown below. The idea of a brave swashbuckling hero and a rough leading man was someone who had loved deeply, sometimes carelessly, and always kept quiet when they told these names late in life. Lancaster wasn't not looking for shock value but rather freedom from decades of pretending, keeping a truth hidden and safe that it said as much about him as any movie. Lancaster died in his role as a place to live in Century City, Los Angeles after having his third heart attack at 4:50 a.m. on October 20, 1994. His body was found burned, and his ashes were spread out under a big oak tree in This Is Westwood Memorial Park, which is a small business in Westwood Village, California. There is a square ground plaque among others marked Burt Lancaster 1913 to 1994, shows where it is since he had asked for no memorial or he was buried after a service.